Hello, everybody, and welcome to Watch Power, my daily show where I am watching, but not for the apocalypse. Rather, I am watching systems of power and people in power in our society. Today, we are going to talk about week 70 of the Trump administration and then get our politics update from Kate for the People. I am Daniella Mestyanek Young, your friendly neighborhood scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership, a local watcherwoman for all of the things going on. I am the author of 2 books, my best-selling memoir, Uncultured, about growing up in the Children of God religious cult, and then going into the cult of the U.S. Army, and my newest book, The Best Thing an Intelligence Officer Can Do for You, a tactics book, Cults, Tyrants, and Bad Guys, How They Control You, Get You, Keep You, and the things that they do when they are in control. You can get signed copies of that attached here. My cult tactics book here. Please feel free to give or leave donations. I share those 50% with my main anchors. And a reminder that these are our jobs and we would love to get to keep doing them. I have also created a workbook, which is to help you deconstruct a worldview or a pseudo-identity that cults have given to you. Well, this is week 70 of the Trump administration. There are approximately 140 weeks left. And even if you're bad at math like me, #homeschool, it may occur to you that we are a third of the way through the Trump administration. Oh, what if he doesn't leave office? I'd like to remind you all that a new person becomes president on January 20th, 2029. And that new person will be able to direct the armed forces of the United States and the Secret Service to go get that man out of there or go guard him in his bunker until he chooses to leave. This week, we saw Donald Trump posting pictures of, number one, himself walking with aliens. And of course, it was an alien done on AI that looked like a Black person on purpose in chains because he's a hateful, horrible psychopath. And because, as we know, cults always promise space travel. Wish I had one of those stickers around. Oh, here we go. Cults always promise space travel. Yeah, you can get those in the shop. We also saw him posting pictures of what appears to be him launching a nuclear war. Red buttons, explosions going on. And I like to remind you all that if he was able to launch a nuclear attack, he would be doing so. He would not be daydreaming about it on AI and sharing it with the rest of us. Somebody says they are afraid of what they are going to discover in Culting of America, and you should be. I'm very proud of myself that I've written a book that makes people angry. One of my favorite idea books is, well, Cast, which we're doing right now in book club, but also Invisible Women, which is all about how women are left out of the data and how many of us die because of it. And every time I recommend that book to a woman, I like to warn them, be careful because you're going to be mad at your kitchen for being sexist for 2 weeks at least. I feel like I have written a book in Culting of America that will make you mad about the state of groups in our country. And I'm very proud to have done so. I promise you, though, that it is not as intense as Uncultured. So probably less tears. It is called Invisible Women, yes. And if you are interested in joining book club, that is a Patreon subscription that you can sign up for. We are having one final meeting this week. Hopefully I will get home from my travels to Rhode Island in time for it. And we will be discussing the first 10 chapters of Cast. Then we are taking off the month of June and coming back for July. So it's a $10 a month subscription. However, it's for 20 meetings a year. not 24, in acknowledgement of the fact that Daniella is a human being. All right, we also saw Pete Kegsbreath trying to change the UCMJ. He's really working hard at trying to affect the military because, of course, he's having a really hard time changing the culture of one of our oldest and proudest organizations, which generally wants nothing to do with him. Donald Trump's trip to China kind of blew up in his face because he's not really a functioning person. And you should go look at the picture that China posted of Donald Trump and his administration has not been able to take down. It is effing hilarious. In fact, I'm going to show it to you right now because I can do that. This is my show. All right. Where are you at? Where are you at? Oh, no, I can't do it because it's downstairs. How lame. All right. Well, I will try to get a hold of that. Louisiana had their elections, and it did not go well for Jeff Landry, the man who just canceled their elections, to the fury of most of the population. Oh, come on. Where's this photo? It's so funny. Never mind. If you watch my week 70 of the Trump administration video on any channel of your choosing, you will see it. Maybe they have already gotten it taken down, but not fast enough because I have a copy of it on my other screen. Yeah, so in Louisiana, Jeff Landry lost all 5 of the amendments that he was trying to force through. Turns out the American people don't respond kindly when you cancel elections. I would like to remind all of you that it is significant that the elections were canceled at the state level. Why? Because one of the major checks and balances that we have in America is we don't have federal elections. When Donald Trump was talking about a war so that he could cancel elections, he was talking about Ukraine. We do not have that in America. There is no way for the federal government to cancel elections. There is just no faucet. And George Bush tried. So if you are worried about free and fair elections, educate yourself and get involved in your local elections. That is where it is done. Just like we don't have national elections, we don't have national police. Don't come at me with about the FBI. Those are national detectives. Very different from police. People, when I talk about the military and it's not a cult that answers to the president, people say, okay, fine, but the police. We don't have the police in America, even though fuck the police. I think that was most of what went on this week. It was kind of a slow week because, of course, he was out of the country. But wait. Oh, Kristi Noem. Who's that? Yeah, the bird-legged hoe. She is being evicted from the Coast Guard base. Oh, look, there it is. There's the picture of Donald Trump that China took, and it's kind of a great view of this whole country right now, methinks. But good job for that photographer. Yeah, so Kristi Noem is getting evicted from the Coast Guard base. No more love for her. So sad. I'm heartbroken. What else we got, people? I am off to Raleigh this weekend, part of the Knitting Cult book tour. We are going to be just south of Raleigh, in fact, in Garner at Crafty's Pizza Pub. And you can get the details here. The tickets are free unless you would like to pre-order a book, which we will then have for you. And of course, I am happy to sign. If you got your tickets a week ago, please make sure you check out the new location because we have changed. It has to do with where we can park the Knitting Cult van. So there we will be. Then I'm going to be away for most of June, although I will be doing an event in Seattle on June 25th. stay tuned. I'm not doing Tacoma this time, y'all. Sorry. I know it's a tough drive, but I will have come 3,000 miles. So I think it's okay if you drive an hour to our main event. We are going to be in August driving the Knitting Cult van around the Midwest. We are going to Iowa City, Iowa, Chicago, potentially Columbus, Ohio, and potentially Pittsburgh, I believe. But we don't really have all of those worked out yet. Portland was last summer. Unfortunately, we are not hitting that again most recently. What else we got? We got any questions about what's going on? I read part of the prologue, or the whole prologue, of the newest project that I'm working on. It's called An All-American Fascism. And I've also found the rap artists in New Orleans that are going to be helping me with the musical Cult Baby, the musical, Veterans Included, that everybody is so excited about, potentially some locations to be able to perform it as well. So it's happening. We'll keep you posted. It was another disappointing day in obituaries. But, you know, hopefully we all still have that bottle of champagne chilling. I am so excited for the musical, although I have been heads down working on the book a little bit more intensely last week, making sure that's all planned out and good to go. And of course, reading tons and tons of books on fascism. I have found out recently that I have inspired quite a few people, like Amanda Nelson and Amanda Marshmallow, who does our updates on Casey on the campaign trail, brings in Louisiana politics for us, that I was the one that inspired them to get on the internet and start shit-talking the government, and I am very proud of that. Somebody brought up their concern that the more we joke about them, the more popular it makes them. And like, yes and no. There are algorithms to contend with, of course. And just like I say, every time someone says it's a distraction from the Epstein files, they are mentioning the Epstein files. It is also true, however, that jokes hold a very important place in society, both for normalizing bad behavior, that's what she said, sexualizing and otherwise not sexual conversation, and for calling out bad behavior. And in almost every fight against a legitimate tyrant, you have mockery. It's always good to remember that they want you to be afraid of them. And if you are spending a lot of time being afraid of Donald Trump, you are giving him exactly what he wants. He is afraid that you will laugh at him. And so it is very important to keep doing so. And of course, always remember that they are doing this on purpose. One of the things I predicted in this, our 4-year march toward dictatorship, is that he would test every check and balance of America and that he would be on the news every single day. They want to exhaust you. They want you to think there's nothing that can be done. I'd like to remind you that all of the "we're cooked, it's over" apocalypse language is voter suppression and is helping the bad guys win. Tyrants can be and often are voted out of power. Just ask Hungary. But also, there's a reason that cult leaders and tyrants want you to constantly be in apocalypse mode. And that is because when we are in apocalypse mode, when we think the world is ending in 20 minutes, there's nothing we can do about it. We sit down and hug our families. Meanwhile, there's tons and tons and tons that you can do about it. And I always like to remind people that America cannot be ruled by force. I was actually really inspired by Amanda Nelson's content this weekend. I'm always inspired by her content. She went down to Montgomery, Alabama, and got in the fight with a bunch of organizers who have been doing this for a lot longer than we've had the political influencer class. So Never forget, things are being done, and there's always a way to fight back. And America cannot be ruled by force. Simply not possible. I was reminded by Heather Cox Richardson that one of the things about having a two-party system is that when one party pisses off the people can vote them out, they can go away and come back and try again later. When you sort of have a non-effective two-party system, what they're trying to cheat and get, there's no space for you to go away when the people are mad at you. This is why tyrants, one of the reasons why tyrants don't last for very long. But the we're cooked language is simply American exceptionalism, white America to be specific. This country has not been great for a lot of people for a long time. And you were never actually guaranteed a good government that worked for you. Welcome to things the rest of the world has been dealing with for a very, very long time. But I promise you, nobody has ever killed 350 million people, and neither have they spontaneously combusted. So no, we're not cooked. It's not over. Get in the fight. Thanks. Okay. At some point, I believe, we will be joined by Kate for the People. I'm not 100% sure it's going to be 11:15 or 11:30. So I'm going to answer questions until she gets here. Am I still working on Un-American? Not actively right now. Un-American is a second memoir that I started working on pretty much as soon as I finished Uncultured, because I found out some information that changed everything about how I saw the world. Uncultured is kind of my hero's journey memoir. Un-American, I would say, is the anti-hero memoir. It is still stories about cults and the army, but instead of looking outward at the groups around me, I'm looking inward. I'm looking at power and privilege and whiteness and otherness and what it means to be an American. And if you are interested, I've made a 6-hour video book preview of that story and its topics, and you can watch that on Patreon. I'll share the link again. I had a plan to work on it after Culting of America. Then I decided I needed a break from writing books, and then my brain told me we were writing an all-American fascism. So I'm working on that. Not 100% sure when I'll get back to the memoir. Memoirs are hard to write. My life is really good right now, so it's kind of hard to put myself back in a bad place. I mean, do I have any thoughts about the FBI director going snorkeling in the Pearl Harbor Memorial? This is what happens when you put unqualified pieces of shit into positions they are not qualified for. That's my opinion on this Memorial Day weekend. Fuck him, shame on him, and all the things. Yay, I'm so happy I'm coming to Raleigh too. I don't know that we're going to actually see that much of it, honestly. I think Mr. Knitting Call Lady just likes to drive big things around because it's fun for him. And we are going to come up. We are going to hang out with any of you that show up. And then the next day we are going to take ourselves, I believe, to a campground on a lake or Ocean City or something. Am I supposed to be showing? The rest of the world is standing up to Trump. Oh, Peter, what about intelligence assets in the political influencer field? I'm sorry, but this question is kind of just you showing your naked booty in public. You don't know anything about intelligence assets in the political influencer field, and nobody that knows anything about intelligence assets in the political influencer field is talking to you. But you have been falling for people's BS. Like, if you accidentally stumbled onto the fact that I or someone else was an intelligence asset for the US government, you would wake up in Guantanamo. Please stop. Nobody talking to you on the internet, nobody using the word psyops knows a fucking thing. Nobody talking about drones knows anything about drones. And I once wrote a book on drones for the United States Army. No, stop. Just stop. This is like when people think they know stuff about the military and they haven't been in the military. Do so much better. I was not wrong about that, Peter. Sit down and clutch your man pearls. You do not have inside information about who on the internet is an intelligence asset. That's just fake. You just made that up. So nobody's listening to you. Yeah. US doesn't fuck around with secrets. The fact that I could possibly be working for Donald Trump, however, also means you understand nothing about malignant narcissists or cult leaders. This is always funny when people try to accuse me of being a cult leader, but they haven't done their homework. So they don't know what cult leaders are like. I find it to be hilarious. Okay, Peter, now you're just going to be blocked because this is not your space. Yeah. Bye-bye. Oh, so you know about my relationship with a lieutenant colonel? I fucking know that nobody's feeding you secrets and then you're talking about them on the internet. Yes, I do know that, in fact, because I was a former intelligence officer for the United States military. That was my whole adult job. Bye-bye, Peter. Always important to ask people how people know things. The other day I got a question. Well, my mom says that there are troops going boots on the ground in Iran. Why do you think your mother has this information? Please tell me about her background in military operations and troop movements, logistics, or intelligence. And then how she's able to talk about it on the internet. No, you got nothing? Okay. Yeah. If you are friends with the colonel who's given you that kind of insider information, the colonel is going to be very glad that I am shutting you up from talking about it because they would be going to jail as well. The apocalyptic thing is a coercive control tactic. I believe I just explained it, but I'm happy to explain again that when you live in a constant state of emergency, you do nothing. The response is to do nothing. So the whole thing about intelligence assets. In order to be a valid intelligence asset, you need to have placement and access. So when I say things like I'm the intelligence officer for the United States, I am using OSINT, open source intelligence, what was used to plan 9/11, also commonly known as Google and whatever you can find on the internet. I don't have placement or access. I have experience and knowledge. And I'm sorting through things to the best of my ability. I am also just a random person in a house in Maryland that gets up every day and talks on the internet about what is going on. You are not a valid intelligence source unless you have placement and access. And nobody with placement and access to intelligence assets, sources, drones, or psychological operations by the government is talking to you about them on the internet. I do think there has been several very interesting psychological operations done by Donald Trump on the American people. And this, again, is just my assessment from the outside. One of them is how much he has gotten most of you to hate and distrust the military by doing very questionable things about the military and apparently leading all civilians to believe that they are experts on maritime law and laws of warfare. Yikes. Once again, listen to who's talking. Placement and access. Y'all, it's just like timing the stock market. If you know about it, you're not allowed to talk about it. And if you don't have inside access, once you find out, the stock market is already responding to it. The stock market is a catalog of the news. Just take that and apply that. Nobody has tips. Nobody has hot tips. All that the analysts are doing is looking and making guesses. And that is true about everybody who is a political influencer. What if Tulsi runs for president again? I mean, she'll lose miserably. I'm not that worried about it. She ran for president the first time because her cult leader, Chris Butler, told her to. That's right. Tulsi Gabbard is in a cult called the Science of Identity Foundation. It is a breakaway from the Hare Krishna cult, also known as ISKCON. I always say it's important to know your cult families. Tulsi Gabbard was born in a cult commune in Hawaii, just like I was, except I was born in the Philippines, and has never left. She's also, of course, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves. Is she still a congressperson? No, because I'm sure she had to give that up to be whatever she is now, Director of National Intelligence. Yeah. Thanks. Donald Trump likes to surround himself with cult people. Pete Hegseth is in Doug Wilson's cult, which is a Christian nationalist cult, and of course recently had Doug Wilson speak at the Pentagon. Amy Coney Barrett is in a Cathvangelical cult called People of Praise, and is super racist but has 2 adopted Black children. I feel very, very sorry for them. It's in fact quite common for white American cults to adopt Black children and other children of color, and they usually have not amazing experiences. Stephen Miller is, of course, absolutely just hugely in the cult of white supremacy. And anyway, MAGA is still bleeding out at an astonishing rate. It seems, just from the elections that happened this week, that Donald Trump has lost white people. And when you have lost white people in America, it's not going to go that well for you. Thank you for recommending my books from Mormon Book Club. Should be interesting for them. For anybody who is wondering, how do we get people out of cults? The answer is, well, nobody knows. If we did know, I'd probably be a billionaire, and my beloved grandfather would not still be running the money for the children of God. However, one of the things we know is that one of the easiest ways to recognize coercive control is to see it in a parallel context. And so this was kind of part of how I wrote my book, Uncultured, and you can sneak it into people as this amazing story of this woman who grew up in one of the worst cults and then became a captain in the army, which is totally true, but the book will do some of the work for you. Someone has asked me if I am going to start a PAC to raise funds. I am not going to start my own PAC. I am not going to start my own nonprofit. I'm very much not trying to start my own things or recreate the wheel. I am trying to figure out how to use my giant platform to raise funds for politics, something that I am good at. Right now, I am reminding people that you don't have to live in a southern state, and you don't have to not care if you live in a northern state. You can pick states and you can send money. I have adopted Texas and Louisiana for the duration of the midterms. Mike Johnson, again, talking about how scared he is that if we lose the House during midterms, which they are predicted to do, there's no path for the Republicans right now to hang on to the House, then the Donald Trump presidency will be over. So I guess he is stumping votes for the Democrats. Thank you very much. Do I feel like the masses are getting deprogrammed more readily thanks to the internet and brilliant and amazing people? Yes and no. The internet, once again, is a tool, and tools can be used in any way. I think the internet was the beginning of the end for a lot of OG cults, like the Children of God, who was small enough that we saw it blow up in 2009, like the Mormons, who I believe we are watching blow up right now, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, and many of these other OG cults that relied on physical isolation. In fact, so many Mormons had not gotten on the internet at the behest of their church that when they got on during COVID, it was a huge crack in the brainwashing for a lot of people. However, the internet has created a new type of isolation, especially with algorithms, and a thing called algorithmic radicalization, which is that our tech overlords discovered that if they feed you extreme content, it keeps you on your screens longer. So what the internet does is essentially push you further in whatever direction you are already leaning. The internet has also made it easier for anyone with a random crazy idea to find themselves an audience. So how could what not be considered a cult? I don't know what that was directed at, but let me know. So imagine a matriarchal hierarchy within a society. I kind of disagree with this statement. I think hierarchies, ladders are patriarchal. I think a matriarchy is a circle and is a world without a hierarchy. And I think that's part of why we keep building bad groups, even though we try to build good groups, is because we are still doing it on the toxic ladder of patriarchy, where people come in a hierarchy. I also remind you that fascism rests on hierarchy and only works if people can be convinced that some people are better than other people. If we refuse to believe that, if we actually double down on what is supposed to be the founding values of America, all men and hopefully women are created equal, there's no patriarchy, there is no fascism. Southern Baptist Convention is definitely a cult and has been very, very harmful to a lot of people. Yes, I 100% agree with that. My grandfather is still involved in the cult. I do not keep in contact with him. I usually hear from him once a year on my birthday, so that's coming up. Religious hierarchy, belief systems, or vertical morality. I mean, anytime we say all, I think that's risky. But most of the religions that we are familiar with in the world, many of which started approximately 2,000 years ago, or some of them in the 1800s, started by 15-year-old well-known con men, are patriarchal and hierarchical and are good to use to control and manipulate people, which is why we see so many Christian and Islamic, etc. based cults, even Buddhist and whatnot. But a reminder that any ideology can be used to manipulate you. You can just write a science fiction novel and make that your cult. We call that Scientology. Scientology has had a huge, huge outsized impact on American society. In my expert opinion, I do not think families and one-on-one cults are doing horrible control without meaning to. I just don't. I do think that you can get the formula for how to be a cult leader from a larger system like the Mormon Church, the Catholic Church, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Seventh-day Adventists, et cetera, but I don't think people just manipulate other people by accident. I just don't believe that. The easiest way to not be a cult leader, not build a cult, is choose not to coerce and manipulate people in order to exploit their labor. I don't think anyone does that by accident. What we see with cult leaders is a process of them learning how to do it and going out and studying other cult leaders. Sometimes it's their own parent who they grow up under, and then testing out and building their own worldview and then their own cult. In one-on-one cults and single family cults, you often see that step being skipped. But again, coercing and manipulating others is not a natural way of being. I don't think people just trip and fall into knowing how to perfectly coercively control people and then don't see the effects that it has on them. I adhere to my own value system, but no, there's no prefabricated value system that I adhere to. I also just don't agree that value systems come from religions, right? In all cultures, human beings have a physiological effect to lying, cheating, stealing, and killing. I think religions came up to explain that, not the other way around. And I think it's really funny that Christians think that people who are not Christian cannot be moral, because I don't not kill people because angry Sky Daddy is waiting to punish me. I don't kill people because it's not good to kill people, for example. Yeah, I mean, missionaries are agents of imperialism. I don't think most missionaries are good. And I think there's usually a whole bunch of justified lying that goes on. They might be nice people. People in cults are really good at presenting as nice people, but I just don't think. Actually, I don't think we can boil down morality to the golden rule. I think we can boil down morality to the platinum rule. Treat people how they want to be treated. Treating people like you want to be treated is very navel-gazing and does not work for everybody. It's a nice throwaway phrase from 2,000 years ago. I have read a lot about the cult of one taste and Nicole Daydown. Watched the documentary. It was very, very, very like the children of God. Just, again, without a religion as the powering worldview. And that woman, I have talked to people who were in the cult and knew her well, is absolutely a sociopath who's just going to keep manipulating people and abusing them until she goes to jail for life. It is a very interesting documentary, though. I agree that clothes came from protection and not from modesty. Clothing is one of the things human beings tend to need to have to survive naturally. Yeah, growing up with a master manipulator definitely messes with your head, and it also makes you good at understanding that kind of stuff. You know, one of the things I think that I did with Uncultured was to show that kids that grow up in cults can do more than just teach you how to survive trauma, which is we understand organizational dynamics better than most people. Most people didn't get a close look at large organizational dynamics until at least their first job at 18 or 22. Meanwhile, I was learning how to get along with my manager when I was 1 year old. The selling of the church to people. I mean, this is a very good comparison that mission work is essentially teaching you to sell the church to people. There's a reason that many of us come out of missionary work and are very, very good at selling. It's actually kind of funny and ironic because I went and pursued a traditional book deal because I was like, I don't want to have to be selling myself all of the time. Turns out you're definitely going to have to be selling yourself all the time. And it also turns out that selling myself from the virtual street corner is exactly what I was made for. The interesting thing is that so many people have never been subjected to direct sales that are not coercive, right? We all understand non-coercive selling tactics, non-deceptive selling tactics, right? We don't tend to walk into Costco and go, they're trying to sell to me. They're grifters, right? We understand being sold to and exchanging money. But with direct sale tactics, what most of us can relate that to is door-to-door salesmen, MLMs, which are definitely commercial cults, etc., etc. I'm not saying, trust me, the false prophet. Oh, there we go. Not having our visit from Kate for the people today, but oh well, we're having a good question and answer session. It's getting Mormon callings at 12, and boy, did those leadership roles fill me in on how culty, sexist, and racist my upbringing was. It is also interesting because when you are being put into places like that, you can develop some other skills. Something I think is funny, quirky, but also a sign of people without the experience dehumanizing cult members is there's a book from 1995 by Margaret Singer, and she wrote 19 Reasons the Marine Corps Isn't a Cult, all of which I can debunk. And one of her reasons was the Marine Corps teaches you useful things and cults don't teach you anything useful. And as someone who speaks 3 languages and has made a living off of things that a cult taught me, I would beg to differ. Mormons, like Children of God survivors, tend to be quite good at public presentation and public speaking because they have been doing it their whole lives. So I think one of the cool things about deconstructing your cult trauma is that you get to go back and own all of those skills again. It's very similar to when they crashed and burned my career for me in the Army. It's complicated inside baseball that you won't understand if you weren't in the Army, but I was going to have to repeat the job I had just done for 3 years. It was basically invalidated because I didn't get an award. And, they said bad things about me in my evaluation. So I went from being someone who was projected to promote ahead of my class, potentially be a general one day, to someone who would maybe never make major. And the job that I just did for 3 years, including 2 deployments, was invalidated. However, the second I left the Army, all my experience counted again magically. And I think that is kind of what deconstructing does. LGATs do teach useful things, and they are still cults, I believe. At least they use cult tactics, and I don't know why you need cult tactics if you're not a cult. LGATs are large group awareness trainings, landmark, EST, and anything that ends in Oni Robbins. My cult restricted outside music entirely. Same. When I was 15 and I was thrown out of the cult and thrown into Houston, Texas, in a high school with 4,000 students, the scariest questions you could ask me are, where are you from and what music do you like to listen to? Questions that high school students tend to ask quite a lot. The difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Okay, so May is Military Appreciation Month. Show appreciation to the military and their families, generally. Memorial Day, which is usually 1 or 2 days before or after my birthday, today it's on my birthday this year, is for remembering dead service members, and specifically service members who were killed in action. Although service members who have died by suicide are starting to come into it more and more as well, especially as we talk more about how hard it is to separate whether or not they were killed by trauma caused by the military. And Veterans Day is when you see everybody you know posting pictures of themselves in uniform on the internet. Never catch me doing that. It seems like a weird thank me for my service, but Veterans Day is for the rest of us who served but are still alive. It's also usually a really infuriating day for women who served, as we go around trying to get free stuff just like the men do. And we get told, sorry, it's not for spouses, even though women have been serving on active duty for far longer than 100 years. You will hear a lot of people getting really mad about people saying celebrating Memorial Day. And honestly, F them. I will be reading on Memorial Day, my birthday, my essay called Why I Celebrate Memorial Day. And I promise you that all of those men and women that we pour a drink out for and remember on Memorial Day would be partying with their families and celebrating the start of summer if they were here. They, in theory, died to protect the American way of life. So please do not let people guilt you about being celebratory on Memorial Day weekend. Somebody said up here, hard to know what your hobby is after your cult. I'm sorry. Oh, there it is. Oh, I had already pinned it. Okay. And I would say not only is it hard to know what your hobbies are, you potentially don't even have a personality. If you are a cult baby, if you were born and raised in a high control, high demand organization or a 1-1 cult or a family cult, you don't know who you are. Your job between the ages of 0 and 6 is to be figuring out who you are as a person. Toddlers, very specifically, are as narcissistic as they are because they need to be. They are figuring out for the first time that they are separate people from their mothers. Teenagers, equally, are incredibly narcissistic because they are figuring out who they are going to be without their family systems always attached to them. If you did not have periods of unrestrained development as a toddler in those years from 1 to 6, or as a teenager, you don't know who you are. That can be extremely hard when you get thrown out of a cult that was telling you who you were. Cults always make you adopt kind of a pseudo identity, and that pseudo identity is a group identity. One of the things you have to do after you leave a cult is figure out your personality. I like this Dolly Parton quote that says, figure out who you are and then do it on purpose. This is also why we have this thing called delayed adolescence, because you didn't get to have an adolescent. I get asked all the time why people can't tell if I'm 20 or 50. And I say, I think that is a good description of cult babies. Delayed adolescence is embarrassing. You have to be a bit navel-gazing and narcissistic. Number one, that does not mean you are a malignant narcissist. Many people in your friends group, your former friend group, and your family group will accuse you of being a narcissist as you are going through delayed adolescence. Just fucking don't pay attention to them. You got to get pretty sick of yourself when you are discovering who you are. We had a cookout making plantain chips on Saturday. Oh, I love to make homemade plantain chips. Woke up and had a year-long conversation with yourself about whether you liked vinegar or not. I love it. I mean, I had this very important part of my identity, which was I love to cook, right? And then I realized I actually really hate to cook. I can cook very, very well as a result of being trafficked and made a kitchen slave at the age of 11, specifically in a part of Brazil where really good food comes from, and then a part of Mexico where really good food comes from. And then I had to cook a lot for myself as an indigent teenager and college student in America, and was adopted by a Punjabi Canadian family. So I make great Indian food. Ethiopian food is my favorite. So I learned how to cook that. But I finally was able to realize, like, I don't like cooking. It's labor. I don't enjoy it. I'm autistic AF. I'm very unserious about food, though very serious about salad. And one of the things that came out of that was I just cook less now. And one of the things I do with my money is cook less and tip more. So that was part of it for me. It like literally flipped from I love to cook to I actually hate to cook. And that's how things can go. When, you know, it's an interesting thing. Like every time I see these programs that are intended to help veterans, but what they do is just translate what you did in the military to outside society. But like most of us didn't really get to pick our jobs. So just because you are good at something, women who choose to be child-free hear this a lot. Oh, but you would be such a good mom. Okay. Just because I would be does not mean I owe that to the world. But, you know, the Republicans are freaking out right now because we are under-babied. I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that there is no support for mothers and it takes a village is the most gaslighting phrase in America. Yeah, again, nothing about, this was not a debate about whether cooking or cleaning is awesome. This was a debate about, or this was an explanation about how you can think that something that you were made to do in a high control group is a really important part of your identity. And that can completely change once you actually go on a journey to discover who you are and what you like. And that could take a very long time. I have been to Canada. Last year we went We drove from DC to San Francisco and then Lake Tahoe via Canada, basically about as far as we could. So we drove all the way through Canada. We had a very cool event in Toronto, several hours, I think, outside of Toronto, but there we have it. Did not get tons of time to see Canada. And I've also been to Vancouver when I lived in Seattle for many years. And Vancouver might be one of my favorite places in the world. But as much as I love Canada, much too cold for the likes of me. Cleaning was another one for me that I figured out I was not interested in. And yeah, but some people love it. For some people, like, that's truly how they can think, can work off steam. You know, everyone has different things. I like to work out. Kids working in their families' businesses. I mean, you're supposed to get paid, but there's not a lot of supervision of that. You are supposed to pay your kids the same amount you would have to pay somebody else for the job. You're not supposed to pay them more. That's tax fraud. You're not supposed to pay them or significantly more. You're not supposed to pay them less. But yeah, we have a huge hole in labor laws, which is we have pretty strong labor laws for children, unless it's your family, unless you're working in your family's business or your church. And they can pretty much do whatever they want. There are also 4 industries that I've called out in the culting of America, which is agriculture, childcare, restaurants, and entertainment, in which it's extremely easy to traffic children because we have left so many loopholes. Thank you. Yeah, I think that so many children are exploited in their families' businesses. I don't think there is an ethical way to monetize your children. I think you teach children to value things like hard work by you doing hard work, not by you making them do hard work. And I tend to repeat, if it is something you would have to pay another adult to do for you, you should not be having your children do it. Same for volunteering. Your children can learn the value of volunteering by watching you go volunteer while they play with their friends. It would definitely be hard for Americans to accept children's rights because they want free work. Also, because Mormons and evangelicals don't want to stop hitting their children, and also because the military doesn't want to stop recruiting below the age of 18. That is why we are one of the few countries that has not signed the UN's rights of children. It used to be us in Somalia, but Somalia has now signed. So here we are. But, you know, Mom Donnie's out here showing everybody that if he wanted to, he would, with taxing the rich and then getting things taken care of, right? Tax Taylor Swift, paid for universal childcare, taxed the rich, and now he has permanently funded libraries and public parks who no longer have to waste woman hours applying for funding. So I'm really hoping that we start seeing this in other places. I, very, very much love Hamilton, as you all know. And I described the first quarter of the musical Hamilton as like, there might be a war, but if we survive, we're going to get to build a new America. And that is kind of what I feel like we are going through right now. Alberta is very culty and has been for a long time. My Canadian friends, the Children of God, was big on recruiting in parts of Canada, especially Alberta. I think it's because of the isolation. I think the same is true for small towns in America, which is what the Christian nationalist movement has been really counting on. Yeah. Tax the rich, and the rich are still rich. The world didn't implode. There wasn't a mass exodus from New York City, etc. Generally, when people are saying we can't do something because this would happen, and they just act like that's automatic, like, yeah, not so much. It's like how much men howled and howled and howled that we could not put women on combat teams in Afghanistan because the Afghans don't respect women. And then when it happened, it turned out that we found that the Afghan hierarchy goes men, women, American soldier. Generally speaking, when a group of people can't do something, you don't have to make laws to keep them from doing it. I had no rules in my house that Mr. Knitting Coat Lady was not allowed to breastfeed the baby, and it turned out just fine. Women now run many more marathons than men, and not a single uterus has fallen out. Shocker. My response to they would leave is let them. I completely agree. I mean, it has been really sad to watch social services in America fall apart, because when I moved here 20 years ago, I thought it was great. I was always very, very happy to pay taxes because I have lived in countries that don't have almost any kinds of social systems. One of those countries being Brazil, who is now kind of leading world development in social systems and safety nets for their population. They just took their country off the UN hunger map, reducing hunger from 11 million to less than 2 million. And they did it by doing something that was done only once before in the times of Queen Elizabeth. And that was to make letting people go hungry illegal. The government in England during the time of Queen Elizabeth made it illegal for parishes and villages to let people starve. So what happened is that meant all of local government had to come up with programs to take care of the indigent and the elderly. What that resulted in was young people could move to the cities, really kickstarting the Industrial Revolution because they knew mom and dad would be taken care of back home. Brazil has just done a very, very similar thing. And again, in under 2 years, took their country off the UN hunger map. It's almost like social services work. Republican dog is not happy to hear me talking about it. You are absolutely correct. People ask me why the dog is a Republican, and I always say, I don't know. I ordered a Democrat dog. I mean, we thought he was in the beginning, and then he went through a libertarian phase as an adolescent, because of course that's an adolescent political theory. And then he just got radicalized as a full MAGA Republican. And in fact, he originally had red hair, but now he has gone almost white with rage. He hates other people, other dogs for existing. He's incredibly racist, and he's just always hanging out on Signal Chat with Pete Keg's breath talking shit. Anyway, he's mad all the time because his people are failing really, really hard. And now that I have you laughing about the Republican dog, I like to tell people that calling my dog a Republican is anthropomorphic political satire, and it's hilarious. Calling Republicans dogs or maggots is dehumanizing language. And the thing we tend to do right after we dehumanize people every single time is kill them. So, had to call myself out on the maggots thing because it was very clever. But please remember, when they go low, we should go high. Thank you all for hanging out with me today. I am Daniella, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership, a random person who sits in her house knitting and talking about her expertise on group behavior, specifically when it is used for bad. I have written 2 books. Uncultured, my best-selling, critically acclaimed memoir of growing up in the Children of God religious cult and going into the cult of the U.S. Army, and my cult tactics book, which didn't sell to traditional publishing because they wanted a spicy call-out book. But I did something useful, which will always be useful, which will age very well, which is a tactics book. Just like in the U.S. military, we learned after about 10 years in Afghanistan that it actually didn't matter to know the specific group that the person that was trying to blow you up came from. What mattered was tactics, techniques, and procedures. Once you can recognize them, you can diagnose them in your own life. Because as we know from the existence of 1-1 cults and single family cults, we are never going to diagnose all of them. Most of you are never going to get the validity that I have of the cult that you grew up in being recognized. But it doesn't matter what you call it. You know, I had somebody really snippily kind of be like, well, I prefer the language of malignant narcissist for 1-1 cults, for abusive relationship. Okay, then use that language. But I'm here to help everyone understand their experiences with coercive control. In fact, 3 years ago when I was at Harvard, everybody was like, bad leadership, what are you going to do with that? And that's the correct question, because it was true that companies and groups were never going to pay me to tell them how bad their companies were. But as soon as I figured out I wanted to help individuals understand groups that have hurt them in the past, understand groups that are hurting them now, so they can avoid groups that hurt them in the future, that's what your intelligence officer is for. Thank you all. I will be back tomorrow from National Airport to talk with Rebecca Slew, White Woman Whisperer, for our Tuesday segment, Hey White Women, where we deconstruct the cult of white supremacy. Once again, I will be in Raleigh this Saturday, and if you are interested, you can come see me. You can catch reruns of this show anytime on my YouTube channel, Knitting Cult Lady. Thank you. Have a day. Vaya. Pucha vida, señor. Pucha vida. No tem que ser assim.